off and running. We would have had ALP in person, but it's bittersweet because while we can't see each other, we can't be together physically, we can see each other virtually on the screen. And so I miss seeing everybody face to face. I miss the warm hugs that we always get from our ALP colleagues. I think the ALP for me has always been that event where I just come away feeling so rejuvenated. I feel so much pride for what CUPA-HR is able to do for higher ed HR. I get to engage with colleagues, and I'm sure you're feeling that same, that the ALP is that opportunity for us to engage with each other. We share stories of what we're doing on our campuses, what someone else is doing on their campus. We learn from each other. We hear wonderful keynote speakers. And so hopefully you were able to hear Shola Richards last week. And was he not just amazing? And the message that he shared of kindness, and I'll add my own suggestion today to echo Andy's focus on finding beauty, and us finding gratitude, being grateful for what we do have. So while I miss not being with you, because that's always so special, I am grateful for technology. I'm grateful that our CUPA National Office staff has found ways to continue pivoting. And I'm grateful that you're willing to do this through technology. No, it's not the same, but we're making the best of it. I know that you're going to have a great day together, celebrating the work of the Eastern region, celebrating the chapters, recognizing what each of you is doing that makes you special and that makes you be able to share something that others can learn from. So I just want to thank you, and I want to welcome you. And maybe next year ALP will be in person, but for now, we're making the best of it. And I'm grateful for each of you. And I'm also grateful for Siegel and Kelly Jones and Carolyn and their team for all that they do to support ALP and all that they've done for so long to support ALP. And of course, our other co-sponsors. I'll turn it back over to Andy. And again, just welcome and thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And Susan and I knew we were both going to provide opening comments, but I swear my first opening comment here that I have for the next part starts with, I am so grateful.
And we did not plan that.
To each and every one of you for all that you're doing on your campuses and all that you're doing to create and sustain our higher ed HR community. So as I said in our stop, swap, and roll sessions last week, we know that HR can be a lonely and very stressful job. I hope you will use this opportunity as a CUPA-HR leader to lean on your colleagues and to also encourage you to lean on, and also encourage them to lean on you. As region and chapter leaders, it's so important that we're also conduits for our HR colleagues in our areas, whether it be our chapter or whether it be our region. Our work to create the virtual events that we plan is so critically important, but our work to create and sustain connections between our colleagues every single day is even more important. We need encouragement and we need support from each other now more than ever. I also encourage you, as part of this CUPA-HR leadership experience, to informally connect with your colleagues across your chapters and with your colleagues on your board. We have important work to do, but we also need to create opportunities to get to know each other more than just at the professional level. As a matter of fact, over 20 years ago, it's probably even a good bit more than 20 years ago, Susan Norton and I connected through CUPA-HR. We connected as colleagues and have become lifelong friends. So here are some things I know, and she doesn't know I'm going to say this. Here's some things I know about Susan that I would not have known had I not connected with her personally and professionally. Susan and I were born one day apart. She's actually a day older than me, but I look many years older than her. Susan and I both have two sons. In addition to knowing each other through CUPA-HR, we were also partners in crime when I was the head of HR at the University of Georgia. We worked with two of our other colleagues, including Barb Carroll, another former chair of the board, to shake up and restructure an outdated classification system that had been in place for over 20 years. Also, most of you probably don't know that Susan's sister Caroline is also in higher ed HR. She's the chief HR officer for the University of South Carolina. So these are things that, yeah, these are great things that just happen through this connectivity as not only professional colleagues, but lifelong friends. And I hope that through these experiences, you find your Susan Norton and your Andy Brantley through these experiences as chapter and region leaders. So life is short. Let's use it to work together. Before we start today's program, it's my pleasure to recognize our sponsors of this leader experience. We're so grateful for the ongoing support of our key partners like TIAA, Cornerstone On Demand, Page Up, Higher Ed Jobs, and Voya Financial. And I'd like to extend thanks to these partners. I'd also like to recognize our flagship sponsor for this event, Siegel. Siegel is a longtime Mary Ann Wersch Premier Partner and has been a flagship sponsor of this ALP for a number of years. It's now my pleasure to introduce Carolyn Cowper from Siegel. Carolyn, please offer a few words of welcome to our colleagues.
Of course. Thank you, Andy. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Cowper. I'm a vice president within Siegel's Compensation and Career Strategies practice, and I see some familiar faces on the screen here, so glad to see all of you. We're excited to be your flagship sponsor again and being a part of such a wonderful program. We know that this year, especially the past 6 months, has been extremely challenging, and who knows what's to come, but we recognize and applaud all of you. You've been resilient, strong, and have shown such commitment to your institution. So we're proud to be a part of the CUPA community, impressed with all of you, and looking forward to a great session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. We appreciate you, Kelly, and the rest of our Siegel colleagues for all you do to support CUPA-HR all year, every year. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Also, as we know, the CUPA-HR Chapter Excellence Award recognizes a CUPA-HR chapter that's making a significant impact through its commitment to the association and higher ed HR community. Earlier this year, the Maryland chapter received the Eastern Region's Chapter Excellence Award. Yay, Maryland chapter. Congratulations. We've asked a representative from their chapter to spend just a few minutes highlighting one of their success stories. And here to speak on behalf of the Maryland chapter is Sally Reed, Associate VP for HR at the University of Baltimore and past president of the Maryland chapter. Sally.
Good morning. Before I talk about Maryland chapter, I just want to give a shout out to all the moms and dads who are managing the first day of virtual learning today, myself included. We started first grade online today, and yeah, so we're like 30 minutes in. So far, so good. My gratitude, there you go. I'm looking for the beauty and the gratitude in that. But yeah, so Maryland, I mean, we are thrilled with this recognition. And, you know, I think when we talk about the success of our chapter, you know, Christy Yowell started us off in the right direction when the Maryland chapter was reformed 5 years ago. And we've had tremendous board participation each year. Like the leadership is really a group of committed folks, a number of whom are on this call this morning. And we have tremendous relationships with our sponsors and support from our sponsors who come to all of our face-to-face events. And because we tend to have our face-to-face events, we are no cost or low cost for the organization itself. It's no cost for people to attend. It's low cost because we utilize campuses with parking and where we don't have to pay room reservations. So we're only paying for food. the combination of the sponsor support that we have and the low cost events means that we've been able to invest wisely in supporting our chapter. And so one of our marquee events last year is what we called the HR Academy. And the HR Academy was a full day conference style event, but specifically targeting our non-exempt, paraprofessional, entry career professional staff in the offices. And what we had determined, what we had figured out was that this is the group that gets left out of, they don't get to attend national, it costs too much money. It's difficult and complicated for non-exempt staff to travel because of FLSA regulations. What counts as work time, what doesn't. And even what we found is that at our quarterly events, a lot of times our non-exempt staff weren't attending. And so we created this HR Academy to fill that void. And so the way that we worked this, it was free for our attendees. We ended up with 54 attendees from 18 separate institutions in our chapter. And we marketed it through the chief HR officers at each campus. And we did this for two reasons. One is we wanted to make sure that there was buy-in on their attendance, like the attendance of the staff, that they would have that day free to come to this event. And we also wanted to make sure that the right people were selected to attend, that it wasn't going to be senior level professional staff who said, hey, I need some continuing ed credits, or I like all the CUPA events. So we sent invitations through each of the CHROs to attend. And then we utilized our own membership. We had one of our chapters, the University of Maryland chapter, Jewel Washington was currently an emerging leader for CUPA, so she did our keynote. We networked through our own executive, our board members, and our chapter membership at the senior level to find people who presented on various topics. And so we ended up doing 2 sets of concurrent sessions with 3 topics each, and really sort of wanted to get the basics about like HR 101, Higher Ed 101, employment laws, and sorry, my child's like standing right here trying to talk to me right now. So much for that. But again, it was the topics that I feel like get missed at some of at the bigger conferences because we're focused really in depth. And we had tremendous evaluations from this event. It's something that we definitely would repeat. We have not done it this year. We were scheduled to do it again this summer because it was so successful last year. But of course, we have not been able to do that, but we are working with our training and with our programming committee on how we could incorporate virtual learning that covers the same thing. But of course, for that population that doesn't generally get to go to conferences, we really appreciated the ability to pull them all together. So it really ended up being, very inexpensive. Again, we just paid for catering. We did pay, I think we got a discount on the rooms from the Community College of Baltimore County, which has one of our board members, Yvette, who's our president-elect for next year, hosted. So we really leveraged all of our membership and our board members and our sponsors so that we could provide this at no cost. And it was just a tremendous success.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. And thanks to you and your Maryland colleagues for the great work that you're doing and continuing to do in this virtual space. I just saw something on LinkedIn this morning from Mike reminding Maryland chapter people to register for an upcoming event. So thank you all for your commitment. And I love the idea of how the focus for that event was on our non-exempt team members, those who don't have as much opportunity to travel and that type of thing. And, as we think about all the things going on, our staff that's on the front line right now, just like the rest of us, really need our help and support. So thank you, Sally and your colleagues, much appreciated. And good luck with the homeschooling today, while also trying to manage a CUPA-HR event and all that's going on at your institution. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So we are also so grateful for the leadership of our region boards, and I'm very pleased to turn over the program now to Cassie Goyle from Rhode Island School of Design and chair-elect of our Eastern Region Board. Susan and I are going to kind of bow out now and let our region leaders take over, but we are so pleased that you are here today. I see that there are currently 49 people logged in, and I'm just thrilled with the work that you're doing and your commitment to CUPA-HR and your commitment to one another. So Cassie, I'm going to turn it over to you to take it away.
Thank you so much, Andy. Welcome, everybody. I think I'm echoing everyone's sentiments when I say this really is one of my favorite events of ALP. And while I'm not sitting in sunny Tampa with all of you now, I'm in scenic Cumberland with construction right outside my house. It's nice to see everyone and to be spending some time with you this morning. So thank you. As I was reflecting on our session this morning, I was so grateful to have the opportunity to connect with everybody. I think especially considering the current state of affairs that we're in now, just how difficult this time is and how we're really doing the best we can to make it through. And I still see so many of us smiling. So what a good testament to the leaders that we have here and sort of the spirit that we all have. So thank you for joining us this morning. Before we get into our session today, I'd love to take the opportunity to introduce the Eastern Region Board to you. So board members, as I say your name, if you could please just give a quick wave, that would be great. So we will start with our fearless chair, who's coming to us direct from space, Eric Seastead from St. Bonaventure University. We also have Christy Yowell from Goucher College, who is our past chair, our current past chair. We have Bill Brady joining us from UMass Amherst, our new at-large member. We have Vicki Stewart coming to us from York College of Pennsylvania, who is our representative to the national board. I'm looking through, we have Michelle Fulham from Pitt, another at-large member. Let's see who else. We have Keisha Chavez, our other new board member joining us from Montclair State University. Sue Malhotra coming to us from the City University New York system, another at-large member. And just to make sure I did not forget anyone, Clint Urey, another at-large member from University, or Penn State rather. He should be joining our call soon if he's not here. Lynn Adams from Prince George's Community College couldn't be with us this morning. And I do believe that that is our team. So thank you all for being here this morning. All right, so without further ado, let's take it away and get started on our first session. So I'll be facilitating us through our first topic. And as I mentioned, this session is really one of my favorites. I'm always inspired by the region and chair connection because it's such a good opportunity to learn from each other. So like Sally just shared with us, to hear the success stories of each chapter is so inspiring. And as we're gearing up for probably what's going to be one of our strangest years yet, I'm so excited to hear what everybody has to share. So please, make use of the chat function. Feel free to share your ideas. One of the things I love so much about the higher ed HR community is just the generosity of spirit that we all have, always sharing resources and ideas. And we're only as successful as what we share with each other and the different ideas we have. So please, let's pretend we're still at ALP, speak out, share your ideas, and let's prepare for a good year ahead. So to get our session started, Beth, would you mind launching our first poll? We're doing everything we can to make this as interactive as possible. All right, so now we're going to be talking about different types of events, virtual events. And our question is, has your chapter used a virtual meeting platform to host a chapter event? Just a yes or no, and submit when you're done, please. All right, Beth, and I might just need your assistance with figuring out where those responses went.
I still show we've got a few folks who are contributing. Okay, I'm gonna, right now we're showing 23 people, 24 people have said yes, they've used the virtual meeting platform to host a chapter event, and 11 have not.
Okay.
And I think that's all who's going to vote for. So 24 have and 11 have not.
Okay, great. So I'm not good at math, that's why I work in HR, but it seems, okay, 69% have said yes, and 31% have said no. So this is great. It seems like really about little over 2/3 of the participants today have used virtual meeting platforms to host chapter events. So let's just talk about what that looks like for you. What types of events have you done in the past? How have you collaborated with corporate partners for virtual events? What are your chapters doing to help provide virtual opportunities to your constituents?
Well, the Maryland chapter, we've been working with our corporate sponsors and they've been providing some free webinars. So we've been putting that out on our webpage and on LinkedIn to everybody.
That's great. Shannon, are you comfortable sharing a little bit more what types of webinars that you've been hosting?
Yeah, so some of them have been around managing mental health and stress in the workplace, COVID return, how that impacts your benefits, a lot from Exude, helping with the race conversations that we all need to have. Who else? Siegel, I think, is another one that's been giving us the sessions too.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it seems like, especially now so more than ever, a lot of emphasis on mindfulness, self-care, mental well-being. I know at RISD, we've done the same very early on, hosting a mindfulness workshop. And I think more so than anything, the staff at our institutions, the faculty at our institutions are appreciative that we continue to find ways to deliver this training to them and really recognize the experience that they're going through. So thank you so much for sharing.
We're actually having an essential oil workshop later after this event on my campus. So.
That's so fun. If you could share that Zoom link with all of us, that would be great. You'll have a lot more. Awesome. Anybody else? What types of events have you done over the past year or a couple of years with your corporate partners, and what does that relationship look like? I know for us, maybe a couple of years ago in the Southern New England chapter, we really started to focus more on how can we make the sessions that we offer more attainable, more accessible. So similar to the Maryland chapter, thinking about the cost of events, thinking about the time constraints that we all have, how much pressure there is for us in HR to do more with less, but also make sure that we're filling our own cups as HR professionals and I'm taking that time for professional development, stepping away, getting to network with our peers and colleagues. So for the past 2 years, we've been very intentional about focusing on webinars for our fall and winter sessions, and then also doing a more robust spring conference. So really making sure that we not only share with our constituents the wonderful sponsors that we have through CUPA-HR, but just delivering training in a new way. And I know for our chapter, we really saw a significant increase in participation in our events, which ultimately led to more attendees at our spring conference. And none of this would have been possible without the generous support of our corporate sponsors. And I'm always just so amazed and grateful at the time, at the unique opportunities that our sponsors share with us. And so I know for our chapter, we found great success because of that support. We've also had the opportunity to partner with other chapters. So I see my friend Melissa just joined on the screen. Melissa, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I hope you don't mind. I try not to be that facilitator, but here I am. But we've had the opportunity over the past year to share on some virtual opportunities, and just wondering if you might share a little bit more from Northern New England.
Oh, goodness. And I think I might also just bring in, I think Ellen Liptak was on this as well. So Ellen, keep me honest here. So I think that if I remember correctly, we did a collaboration of our 2 chapters, and being that we're tri-state, what a unique opportunity to bring together so many states and so many members. And I think we're also, Bill, I see you're on the line too. We're also in conversation of trying to bring together the 2 chapters in thinking about the learning framework. So that's a really exciting opportunity that we're exploring in December, and it's just more to come. I think that as I see folks on the call, I remember Alp last year, Andrea, you and I had chatted from DC. One of the things that we think about, like you had pointed out, Cassie, is just between talking with people and finding out, hey, can we do this together, to bringing in sponsors together, and then people hearing about the excitement of that. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. It's just a momentum thing. And I don't know what else to add except for the fact that I think that the more that we reach out and kind of draw from each other and share that, that's where I'm finding the sweet spot.
Yeah. I agree. I know when we did our webinar together a few years ago, it was great. We had more than 100 participants. It was a good opportunity to work more closely with our chapters. And Northern New England and Southern New England are kind of unique in that we are both tri-state chapters. So by working together, we have 6 states worth of colleagues coming together to share ideas and you know, really benefit from the generosity of our partners. For those of you that haven't hosted a virtual workshop, I strongly encourage you to do so, especially as we're looking at these new models for the coming year. Hopefully not longer than that, but you never know what's going to happen. And I think one of the things that's always surprised me is our corporate sponsors really, they really take care of everything, from doing run of show, providing the learning platform, suggesting ideas for content. And the content is always so incredibly valuable, delivered in a 1-hour session that really sort of meets the needs of our HR staff. So it's been a really great opportunity. I know I've done a lot of talking, so are there other chapters that might want to talk about your success working with our corporate partners and the type of events you've done?
Hi, this is Greg Mendez. I'm from New York University, and I'm also from the New York Metro chapter. And yeah, I mean, I have my fellow board member Olga is also on today's meeting, and she has been just instrumental in being among the other board members and being able to pull off us doing we've nicknamed virtual happy hours that cover a variety of different topics and exchange. But I think what they all have in common is we are partnering with our corporate sponsors to, you know, share very specific topics, but also, you know, create an area where we as HR professionals can have very frank, candid conversations that it would be difficult to have. And I think what we've done is, you know, we started experimenting, just like so many of you, during COVID-19, initial times of COVID-19, out of necessity. And we realized quickly that people liked it, especially when we were doing it after 5 o'clock. We were surprised how many people wanted it after 5 o'clock. We weren't sure. We experimented different times. For some reason, it worked for us. And what we also noticed was, you know, we were lucky that we were able to use our existing Zoom platforms to be able to do that and use it. We were impressed by the ease of use of Zoom, but we were equally impressed was what the virtual opportunity did was it allowed people that otherwise couldn't be involved in the conversation or couldn't come to a meeting to be there. And that has always been something of a limitation. We know how hard it is to come to our in-person meetings because you've got to commute and you got to take time out of your day. Here, you know exactly when it's going to start, when it's going to end. If you want to hang out afterwards, you can past the meeting. But it has really allowed us, I think, to really up our numbers. So much so, Olga, keep me honest, I think we've done, what, 6? Maybe,
yep.
Maybe more, right? So,
we're coming on to our 7th. We are sending out those invites shortly.
And it's covered an array of topics. And Olga has been kind of our Zoom master guru in being able to pull off everything from polling to now we're going to be experimenting with breakout rooms to really help facilitate conversation, but breakout rooms to also help our sponsors also as well is something we were getting to experiment with so that they have almost kind of a virtual table, virtual opportunity to work to showcase their tools and their services as well. So it's an additional opportunity for our sponsors to connect with our members.
Greg, Olga, are you willing to share just some of the topics? How have you gone about selecting those topics rather? So are you polling your membership? What's sort of coming up for you and how are those topics presenting themselves?
Yeah, we are polling. So that is one of the things we're doing. And we did want to implement our polls, post-event polls, just to kind of listen to our attendees and hear what they want to talk about. And it honestly keeps coming back to either, mental health in the workplace and what is everyone else doing as far as Corona is involved, because that's, every time we meet, we have some kind of an update. Either one school has gone back fully, or some people have decided that they're going to be continuing remote work until the end of the year. There's always something. And I think people just love learning from one another. We have one member in particular who he spearheads everything. I guess his university is far above all of us when it comes to actually making those executive decisions and taking that initiative. And we're always amazed at how much information he gives us. So yeah, let me go through. I have my Eventbrite open so that I can share what we've been doing. So usually the general idea is it's always about, what is everyone doing? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Most recently, we did a virtual social hour facilitated by Cornerstone. And we kind of just talked about current working conditions, returning to campus, managing remote employees, and continuing that engagement with your own employees. Prior to that, we did a really interesting social hour with Jennifer Rubain-Barrero. She's the Vice President for Student Affairs and Alumni Engagement at the College of Staten Island. And she was phenomenal. We talked about the protests that had been going on. This was right when all the civil unrest was happening. And so we were talking about personal protective equipment, counseling, complaints, messaging, how to handle that for people who may not have experience in doing so. So it really has been really navigating our return to campus. And what we initially thought was going to be something that would go through May and June we're now in September. So it really just continues. The navigating your return has been our most common topic, just because there's always so much to speak about. So that's what we've been up to.
For sure. And I think one of the things we're probably all experiencing is once we make a plan to move forward, something happens and suddenly that plan gets tossed aside. And I see a lot of nodding heads. So being able to be nimble, but also having this community of higher ed professionals who really understand how hard we're all working, but how frustrating it can be at sometimes. It feels very validating for sure. And I know as we were preparing for this call, we were talking about, perhaps doing some Zoom happy hours for our chapter and region leaders. And one of the ideas I floated was called Wine and Wine. So maybe that will sort of take flight and we can go from there. But thank you so much for sharing. As another follow-up question, I'm wondering, because you're now at your 7th session, and Greg mentioned, gratitude for Zoom technology, how have you gotten your participants up to speed on Zoom technology? Because as we're looking at using this new resource, one thing that I found as we moved into remote working and these different arrangements is how many different platforms are used and how we're helping those who are joining our sessions feel like they have an understanding of the technology in order to be able to fully participate.
Full disclosure, we were forced into really learning Zoom because our first virtual call was totally Zoom bombed. No one expected it. I think it was April 1st was our first virtual call. So everyone was kind of learning the program. And of course, I was doing the facilitating and just trying to make sure we had everything, all the right people were coming in. And it was my moment of weakness because we had the waiting room, we set up all the right precautions, and we had 2 people that came in at the same time with totally regular profile pictures, totally regular names. They weren't on our RSVP, but we were a little bit flexible because it was our first session. And they came in like 20 minutes in. And in my head, I rationalized it. And I was like, oh, you know what? They must have been at a meeting. They're both late. It's fine. As soon as I let them in, total chaos. It was absolutely mortifying. Most of our Zoom members hopped off, but it was the best learning lesson we could have asked for because we took every single precaution. Everyone was so kind about it, and I think that's what I really appreciated about
members, obviously everybody knows we're all in the same situation. Nobody knows what to do. We're all still figuring out together. And it was the perfect example of exactly what our virtual meetings are about. And it's about sharing your experiences and learning from those experiences. So that has kind of forced us to learn Zoom. And I think our members we do notice that they are repeat members. So they're all kind of getting the hang of it. I think everyone has been using Zoom. People now are moving to Google Classroom and other apps and things like that. But really, a lot of people are now becoming experts at Zoom. We've definitely increased our polling. So it was funny when you started the polls, I was like, that's exactly what we're doing, just to keep everyone on the topic, keep everyone engaged, because that's just one of the things, it's easy to sit here and turn your microphone off and turn your video off, and then you get caught up in your emails and other work, and you want to learn and you want to listen and you want to participate, but it's hard because we're all juggling so much. But I think the polling really does help because it keeps people interested. Everyone's curious about what everyone else is doing. We all want to learn. We all are at different points at our universities. So I think, that's been the best asset as far as Zoom is concerned.
So
Greg.
Olga's defense, I will say this, that one of the fascinating things that happened during that Zoom bomb is that they must have been really engrossed in the topic, because they did not initiate the Zoom bomb until towards the end of the 60-minute session. So I don't know what happened, but we probably had probably some budding HR professionals there, and we probably hooked them. So you never know. These could be future CUPA-HR members. We just don't know it yet. It's hard lessons. I would say this, regardless of the platform, I know that some people are using different platforms because that's what you prefer, or that's what you've got. We're not saying go out and invest in a Zoom subscription if you don't have to. We know times are lean right now, or we get leaner. But I would say is whatever the platform is, whatever you roll out, if it's your first foray or first couple forays for you or your members, keep it simple. If you think you have to do a quick tutorial on how to navigate the system, sure, but don't roll out the bells and whistles. So if you want to use Zoom, but you're not comfortable with polling, not the first time. Maybe just use flashcards or do something over online, and then let yourself and your members get used to it. Let them get used to just the experience, and then push out the bells and whistles. I think what works, as long as they get comfortable and it works for your chapter, I think that is what you want to go with. And it doesn't matter if you're using, if you're using GoToWebinar, if you're using Zoom, whatever works for you. I don't have stock in Zoom, so I don't get anything extra if more people are signing up for Zoom.
Really quickly, Cassie, thank you, Greg. That's some great advice. Thank you, Kelly Jones. Also, she was recommending that they're using hopping.to as a platform as well, and they offered the ability to have half-day joint chapter meetings. And she says that it's really fun. So thanks for sharing, Kelly.
No problem. It's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our New York Metro chapter for all those great ideas. Are there any other chapters that want to jump in and talk about events over the past year, whether it's events, whether it's lessons learned, best practices, maybe things you wouldn't do again, whatever it is, feel free to speak up.
I might just add quickly to Greg's comment about, getting used to being able to operate the Zoom or whatever technologies you're using. We've taken it upon ourselves to take some of our junior people and have them really bone up on how to do that, and then include them in many of the meetings. So it makes them feel important. We need them because they're really good at it and they can manage all the sophisticated stuff. And it also brings them along in their understanding of some of the richer topics or various things that we're discussing. It includes them and makes them feel, like they're contributing to the broader, good, so to speak. And so that's one way. Maybe, you can have somebody on your teams each, be assigned sort of a, hey, why don't you bone up on Zoom or go to, WebEx or whatever it may be that you'd be using. It's a good way to include them.
Thank you so much for that, Kelly. And that's actually a good segue to a topic, I think our third topic that we'll talk about later. No spoiler alerts here, but we are going to talk about engagement and the way that we use students. And so maybe that's another way that we get our student staff or HR interns or however involved, you know, to be able to network with a group of professionals and also provide a much needed service in areas where perhaps the Zoom technology isn't as comfortable as it might be for them. So thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate that. Anybody else?
Cassie?
Yes.
Just to jump in, I mean, I think building off of what the Maryland chapter was talking about earlier, I think that the nice thing about Zoom is it allows us the opportunity to really engage those folks that wouldn't normally have any kind of professional development. So I think that one of the things that we tend to default to frequently is we tend to rely on, for example, law firms to provide legal updates and some of those things. A lot of times that's kind of outside the space of some of our non-exempt colleagues in HR. So it's just something to think about in terms of how do we actually create programs that are really kind of geared towards all levels of HR. A wellness program is great in that space, but you know, sometimes a lot of what has traditionally been part of the webinar kind of culture is really in some ways kind of high-level generalist work and not necessarily some of the specialties. One of the things that that this whole kind of COVID thing has really pointed out to me is that in the last, I have a very large staff, larger university. I have about 65 people in my shop. I only talk to like 8 of them because I'm only dealing with the people who are kind of pandemic crisis people. My poor payroll staff, I don't see them very often. So, you know, I don't see my class and comp staff very often. I don't see my talent acquisition staff. I'm dealing with my generalists that are kind of on the ground dealing with a lot of and labor relations. So I think that one of the nice things about Zoom, and one of the things that I think that I'd like our chapter to think about kind of going forward, is how do we actually pick topics that are more conducive to a broader range of audience within the HR profession.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that that's something that we experienced at our last spring conference, is making sure there was diversity of topics to appeal to all, but then also recognizing that for more entry-level professionals or for entry-level generalists or what have you, not all of the topics were as appealing. And so I think one of our sort of core values at CUPA-HR is accessibility, you know, for everybody. And so how do we make sure that we're doing that in our chapter work as well? Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Cassie, can I just ask another question while we're on the topic of Zoom? So one of the things that I didn't know, whether we had done this as part of our collaboration, SNE, NNE, or just other folks, is when you're having sponsors be presenters, is there a tag team effort to support co-hosting so that you can manage that participation? So I didn't know, Greg or Olga, if you had kind of had a couple people so that you could kind of manage the opportunity of if you're using presentation. I just wanted to explore if there was kind of a shared partnership around that virtual piece.
Co-hosting is definitely a very useful tool, and Zoom does a pretty good job. They've got videos and a lot of supporting material, and a lot of those functionality also exists in other platforms. So double check your platform to see that type of support. But yeah, I mean, just from the perspective of, even if you're just, your chapter is the one that's really driving it, from a logistics point of view, having a co-host, even if it's just one additional co-host, to be able to manage those who are trying to come into the welcome room, the chat, so that you can have one person focus on one set of duties and another person focus on another. It just makes it a lot easier. I think creates it also assures that nothing falls through the cracks. If someone asks a great question in the chat, you don't want someone to feel ignored accidentally. I mean, these are things that just happen, right? No one's doing it intentionally. But then if someone's doing a presentation, like a sponsor or some other guest speaker, yeah, that just makes it, you know, allowing the guest speaker to either go ahead and speak, and we can help drive certain things, or we can have the guest speaker just focus on the presentation while we're working on the other mechanics, right? Oh, look, we have 5 people who just came in the welcome room. Let's double check to make sure we're not getting that Zoom bomber come in. Or what if, you know, oh, there's some great, we'll work the chats, or someone else is gonna manage the polls. Those are great things that you wanna be able to push out and maybe divide and conquer. And you know, that's probably a quick logistics meetings done ahead of time. Maybe a few days before, or even maybe an hour or two beforehand would probably do the trick and be able to make sure you get that. But if you can get someone like at least one co-host, it's a great luxury to have. Once you go with a co-host, or the equivalent of that on your platform, you never want to go back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to echo that, really sort of doing a run of show or a script, so to speak, doing those planning and preparation meetings, I think does really help things go a lot smoother. That's exactly what we did in preparation for today's call. I'm facilitating the session. My friend Keisha is managing the chat box and making sure that we get all those questions. So it does involve a little bit more like technical and tactical planning than maybe an in-person. That certainly helps ensure that things run smoother, you know, doing the tests and making sure the polls run and all of that. So that's been very helpful. As somebody who just loves a good spreadsheet or agenda, I know for me, it certainly helped things become a lot smoother. So you just sort of change the way that you approach the event. I know even for us at RISD, we moved to doing our new employee orientation online. So we always make sure we have multiple co-hosts just in case something goes wrong. But that way things can just go as smooth as possible. And it's just one less thing to worry about. We have so much to think about as it is, so. All right, so Beth, I just want to do a quick check-in. How are we on time so far?
I was just getting ready to send you a note that we're nearing the end of the first topic discussion, and it's a good time to start moving into the next area.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody. If you know, of course, we want to make sure that this event feels accessible to all. So if you're not comfortable speaking out, please feel free to use the chat box, share your events, talk about what you're doing. Let's continue to build our community together. But with that said, I am going to pass the baton over to my friend Christy, who will lead us through the next topic.
Great, thanks, Cassie, and nice to be with you all. So it's ironic that we're talking about the first day of school and how that's going as parents and technology and social media, because while Cassie was talking, apparently the overload of 2 teenage children in my house being on their own Zoom or Microsoft team meetings for appointments and first day of school, along with my Zoom call, just crashed the family internet. And my son, so I got kicked out. My son came running in and said, "You can't steal my Wi-Fi." So I'm now on my phone while they're using the house internet, and we're going to try to figure it all out a little later. So if I look a little off or I don't quite see a message, it's because we're going old school and we're using a cell phone at this point. So, hey, we make it work. Well, I want to piggyback on some of what Cassie was talking about and continue those conversations and really dive in a little bit more. So I'm interested in knowing when you respond, if you could share with us, yes, and I just saw a comment pop up, dads too. Thank you, Cassie. Yes, moms and dads that are home with kids on those first days of school. When you respond to questions, if you could share what chapter you're with, that would be really helpful, just so that if we have follow-up questions or we want to learn more, we'll know what chapter you're representing. And then I would like to start with, what different platforms are we using? Really just to dive in and just name them. What are we using and what are we using them for? So for example, do you have some synchronous and asynchronous content along with social media? And if so, what different platforms are you using for those various modalities? So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
So Christy, for the Southern New England chapter, really where we've been focusing our effort is on our website. We have also have been very intentional about making sure one of our board positions is dedicated to website coordinator and now has morphed into social media. So my friend Kathy, who's on the call with us today, really does that work for the Southern New England chapter, making use of our LinkedIn as well. That is the go-to professional resource. So sharing our events, keeping our Southern New England chapter page going. I also have to say, knowing that having a well-maintained website is one of the qualifiers for the Chapter Excellence Award really has helped us to be more mindful and intentional about making sure our website is up to date. So that's really the resource we use. And then over the past couple of years, now with the CUPA-HR Connect and the communities through there, really that has been our primary mechanism for communicating, sharing ideas. And I found that because we have that resource, there's actually more activity from our chapter as opposed to when we had our listserv previously through like Google.
Great. So I heard a couple of things there, and I'm interested to know what other chapters are doing some of these things. So I think the website isn't obvious. I know you all have websites because I've looked at all of them. How many of you have a formal board position or an informal still leadership level position on your chapters that is focusing on websites and social media? How many of you? And I'm struggling with my flip here on the phone, so I'll rely on everyone else to tell me what the response to that was. So it sounds like that is something that at least many of you have explored and started implementing in your chapters that I think is a great idea, just to keep that focus there. So LinkedIn is something I heard about, using that for event promotion. I know some others have used that as a platform. You know, we heard the Maryland chapter talking about pulling in corporate sponsor webinars and doing some promotion of that through LinkedIn. What other platforms are you using and what are you using them for? So we've heard about event promotion. We've heard about webinars that you may be hosting yourselves or promoting through a sponsor. What else are you putting on there? Are there just reminders? Are there poll questions? Are there informational reading resources? What all are we posting on these various platforms?
I'm working on creating a resource page on our website for any local chapter to use. It's like, when we password protect it for our content that we want to share with people that way. That's something I'm working on currently.
Okay, great.
Shannon,
what else?
Oh, sorry, Christy. Do you mind if I jump in? I'm curious as to what sort of resources you're sharing there. Oops, Shannon, you're on mute still.
Sorry, you were cutting out. My connection's not great on campus, but apparently.
Oh, sorry. It's
at my home either.
Yeah.
What kind of resources are you sharing on there, Shannon?
I was messaging with Sally. We could put the HR Academy out there. We were thinking about any kind of forms and things that we all shared that we, go back and forth asking for advice on. We could put those kind of things out to help people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm interested in knowing, for those of you who are using multiple platforms, let's say you have a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, your website, maybe Instagram, maybe some others. Are you intentionally posting specific types of content, or do you have specific focuses for your online platforms, or is that something you've thought about or something you're interested in? So, and when I talk about focuses, maybe it's LinkedIn is where we post, chapter member vacancies and events. Maybe Instagram is where we focus on, well-being tips of the day. The website is where we do this. So I'm interested in knowing if there's any focuses to your sites.
So Mike Knoll mentioned that they usually copy the same material or things across all of their social media platforms.
Okay. So for
And
others, if you're using
a
multiple
volunteer.
sites right now, is that kind of consistent? You're doing the same things on all?
Yeah, I have a younger volunteer on the committee for me. Hopefully he can get us Instagram going. Or Twitter, one of the two.
Okay. So I'm interested in knowing from some others, and this might be a place our sponsors might have some feedback too. Corporate sponsors, I know you guys are out there on various platforms. Any recommendations on tips of what to focus on what, or is it best practice to just post the similar material across all of them and cross-reference?
Christy, I'll weigh in here, although I welcome any of our sponsors to do so as well. So I'm Julie Boggs. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Director of Member Marketing and Engagement for CUPA-HR, the national office. And my background is on the marketing side. So typically best practice for social media outlets and sharing messages is to think about where are your members? So where are the folks that you want to reach, and how are they interacting with those platforms on a regular basis? So LinkedIn, I think, is a great choice because we find, at least at the national office, that a lot of CUPA-HR members are paying attention in that platform. And then to think about how can you share similar messages, but in a way that's unique for that platform. So the message that you would share about an upcoming conference, for example, maybe that you connect on LinkedIn and you thank the sponsors or thank the presenters who are going to participate in your event, tag them in those posts so that they can share with their own networks to sort of spread that message about the event. You might use a promotional email, which the CUPA-HR National Office can send for you. That way you're hitting sort of the broad audience with the basic message that you're having the event. And then maybe you use the CUPA-HR Connect community platform to start a conversation or get feedback from your members to say, hey, what are the topics you want to talk about, or what questions do you have? Yeah. And so you're in each of those, you're sharing about your event, you're sharing about your conference, but you're doing it in a way that makes sense for the platform itself and for the people who are on that platform. So Beth and I are always happy to chat with any chapter that has questions about kind of how to set up that strategy. And I love the conversation here and kind of getting a sense of what everyone's doing. Thanks,
Great, Julie, thank you so much for that. I think that was some really great advice, and it might be an area that, you know, you're all challenged to think about differently, as not just cross-promoting as put all of the hashtags across the bottom of your flyers, but really, you know, what is going to be your platform for sending something out? Or maybe you have two. You know, maybe when you're posting an event, you do it on your website in an email, or your website in your Facebook page or LinkedIn page, you know, but then how are you pulling in those other sites to draw traffic to those areas? And how are you using them? And do they have tailored focuses for them? So I'd love to hear more from some other chapters about what you either have done, stopped doing, and why, or how this is kind of getting your brain juices energized and what you might be thinking about doing differently in the near future.
Christy, can I just add one thing? You know, as far as the sponsors go, when we say it's a webinar, on top of everything you're doing, we certainly reach out and let people know that it's happening and try to do some personal emails out to people to get attendance up. So, you know, depending on what the sponsors are doing, it may be very appropriate for what the topic is. It may be very appropriate for us to do some outreach as well.
Great, thank you for that. So Mike, I'm gonna tag on you there for a minute. I see you posting that your chapter was using Facebook and then they stopped. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we had, I think it was like 11 to 15 people on Facebook. And we took a look at those same people and found out that they were either on our email lists, coming to events, and or they were on LinkedIn. We have a Twitter account, but I didn't have Twitter, so I don't know if that was the case there. So we just decided to consolidate the ways that we engage with our regular members. And after each event, we do a post-event survey. And one of the questions that Shannon always puts in is how do you best want us to communicate and engage with you? And pretty consistently, it's in the order that I posted there: email first, website, and then LinkedIn. So that's kind of been where we've been focusing our attention.
Great, thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Kelly, did you have something to share?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Julie's advice was exceedingly spot on. The only different things that we do is we may post something out on LinkedIn with an appropriate hashtag or whatever to bookmark those things. And then individuals may also take the same post and put it on either Twitter or Facebook if they have what they consider is maybe a different following, or a separate group that might want to also know. But I think Julie's comments were really, really helpful, and I think that would be, from our perspective, that's probably the most efficient way to do it. And of course, the national office staff, plug, is always great to help you. So.
Agreed, and thank you, Kelly. I'm curious to know, for those of you that are using online platforms, whether that be social media or more synchronous content like this call we're on today, how often are you posting something, or does it depend site by site? What are your best practices and what you found to work the best or not work there? Is it daily, weekly, monthly? What are all of you doing?
So Christy, this is Melissa from the Northern New England chapter, and a couple things came to mind to what you're sharing. One of which is we used to have a position that was dedicated to communications, and what we found was that position became so bogged down with trying to do so much, and that we found that it was actually best to kind of spread out the I don't want to say responsibility, but the ability for all our board to engage in different ways of communicating. So we actually dissolved the role and had that person move into a state rep position. And each of our state reps are, right now I'm working with them and they're exploring opportunities. I think actually 2 of our state reps are even on this call, Jeannie and Heidi. So I'm just calling on them to elaborate, but we're exploring opportunities where our state reps can get to know other type of HR councils and get in with those groups to find out if there's ways that we can share some of our events with those other groups like HERC and like SHRM, and just kind of pull HR professionals together. So that's kind of a way in which it's not necessarily social media, but it's a way in which we're building partnerships and relationships in the states that we have. In terms of the other thing, I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, but we're also finding in terms of posting that we're just trying to figure out how to even have board meetings. Our board, at least I know, and I'm probably not alone, that our board is just so, we're all as HR professionals just trying to figure out how to give time to the board and find it in ways that are meaningful, because right now with fall, it's a little bit bogged down with just so much going on in preparing our institution. So I think that we've kind of laid off a little bit on trying to post, but just think more conscientiously of how do we connect with people and find out what they need, such as through state reps. I don't know if anyone else can react to that, but I can tell you that I just wanted to, what I worry about is sometimes with our board is them even worrying that they can be a board member based on the timing right now with what's going on.
Yeah, Melissa, I love a couple of things you shared there. One was, while you deviated away from the board position, you haven't deviated from the function that board position was created for. And that is, we need to have a deliberate focus on social media. And in your chapter, you found that it was better to spread that out, which I think is completely relevant, because where I've seen those with the most success, it's been where they have that shared collaboration, whether there's a board member kind of pushing out and reminding folks of that, or where they've decentralized it, but it's not a single person in charge of all the content and all the postings. So I think that's great. I'd love to hear from some other folks though around that, but Melissa, I want to give a shout out to all of our HR professionals on the call, because I think your points are so obvious. When we signed up for the board roles we're in right now, none of us ever expected that the world would look like and feel like it does at this moment. And I'm sure every one of us have found, you know, a 50-hour work week has easily become 60, if not more, in an online environment. So your points are well taken. Others, what thoughts, what experiences do you have around this?
I know for us in Southern New England, we really only use our social media for like promotion of events. So so we're not posting really with any frequency, but I do love hearing the different ideas of posting resources, and really inspired by the Maryland chapter, making sure that the events are free and accessible to all. So how can we do some simple things, whether through our website, LinkedIn, social media, to share articles, you know, reminders about remaining connected with CUPA-HR, driving people to use the CUPA communities in different ways. I think, you know, our goal really is to provide resources and that connection to CUPA-HR to our chapters. And so that this is a really sort of very easy and attainable way to make sure that our chapters stay relevant and know that as leaders, we're there, you know, for our colleagues in our area. And that's what we're committed to. So.
Great. Well, I'm going to throw out another question for all of you, but feel free to bounce back to an earlier one as well. I'm interested in knowing if any of you have used any of your platforms as kind of a precursor or a follow-up to other synchronous content you may do. So, for example, let's say that you were having a chapter meeting or a conference style event. Have you used your social media for any pre-reading or pre-discussion before those events, or continued learning and continued discussion post-event?
We're actually starting something new this year. Yvette came up with the idea of having 2 meetings a month. One is an actual content session, and then the other one is a coffee break where we just come together like 2 weeks later, and you know, if we've digested everything, now let's talk it out and see how it worked. So I'm looking forward. We have our first one this week, I believe. So should be interesting.
Great.
Friday.
We'll be interested in knowing how that goes. Anyone else? Does anyone have experiences of what's worked really well in this space that perhaps you haven't done at CUPA, but you've done at other organizations that you can bring to CUPA? Okay, well, I'm going to throw out another question for you while you think and ponder on those. I've got a whole boat full, so don't worry about me. I got plenty of questions. When you are working on your various platforms and you're setting those up or examining them on a routine basis, what have you done with branding to make sure that you have a consistent look and feel among your platforms that's consistent with your chapter? What are some of the things you've all done around branding and setting up those sites?
I know for us, making sure our website is more visually pleasing. So when we host an event, making sure we have some sort of like widget on our front page, sort of like consistent marketing throughout. You know, making sure that when we're at events, as much as everybody hates this, taking photos and making sure that we put those out there and making sure that, you know, it shows people interacting, that our events are fun and people are smiling and happy. That's one thing that I know the national office always does so well, is there's always pictures of like really happy people, and it just makes me excited to go to the event. So that's one thing that we've tried as well. Although I know in my actual role, sometimes having to go around and take pictures at events, people are like, please don't do that, but it ends up doing so much for our website. So as much as you know, we can make things visually pleasing, I think that that's one thing that has really helped us, is to just seem more human and like, oh hey, I recognize my colleague. So that's been one thing that we've tried to be more intentional about, but the photo thing's a little difficult sometimes.
Great. How about others?
Good morning. I'm from the Pennsylvania Delaware chapter, and I have to say I'm gaining mounds of ideas from you all, from the questions and answers. We have not updated branding. We use our current branding and use our webpage to post positions, like we have a treasurer position open now and things like that. But I think we certainly can look forward to enhancing all of the platforms, or enhancing our website platform, and looking into the others as we're listening through. My colleague is here with me, Diane, from our chapter. So I do appreciate this conversation, and it certainly lends insight into other things that we can do via the virtual platforms that are available and the ideas.
Great, thanks, Muriel. Who else? We're interested in hearing about your chapter successes, what hasn't worked and why, lessons learned, or even what it is you plan on doing based on some of these conversations.
So Christy, I just had a quick private chat with somebody. I won't call them out since it was a private chat, but asking about the WordPress platform for your websites, and they were saying they're having a little bit of trouble navigating some of the WordPress functionality and getting the website looking the way that they want it. So I'll offer to everyone what I offered to this person, is that we have a great communications and marketing team in the national office that can absolutely help with any issues that you're having with your website. So if that's been a challenge for you, or a hurdle to doing some of the things Cassie mentioned with keeping the website branded and looking nice, our team is always happy to help sort out any issues that you have with that.
Great, thank you for that.
Julie, does the national office have any sort of job aids to talk through like the basics? I know I manage our HR website for RISD, and recently there was an update where it changes like the view where you're editing, and it made things so much more complicated, but through mashing the keys, I was able to figure out how to get to like editing it in a way that I'm familiar with. Are there any job aids or any sort of support resources that the national office has for those of us in chapter leadership positions to help sort of take the pressure off of your team as well?
Yeah, and Beth is going to touch on some of the resources we have in the Leader Toolkit at the end of today's call, but we do have a kind of a website tutorial document that provides some of the basics of that, and that is in the toolkit. So that's a great example, Cassie, of what you can find in there. And if there's something not in there that you're like, I just need help with this, let me or Beth know. We're always creating new guides and tools and things to add to that to help you all with your roles.
Thank you.
Hi, Christy. Good morning, everyone. This is Kay Silla from the New Jersey chapter. And I just wanted to touch on a question that you asked a few minutes ago about a follow-up from sessions and what you can do. And so I just wanted to share, I attended a session, not through CUPA, but through my university. And there were a lot of questions that were coming through the session that I attended. It was on diversity and inclusion topic. But there were so many questions that 2 weeks later, they brought the speaker back to be able to have a Q&A session just with the speaker to be able to go into more conversation and to be able to answer questions. And so I thought that was a really nice way to follow up from the session, but also be able to spend more time with the speaker if there were a lot of questions that came from that event. So I just wanted to share that idea.
Thank you, Kay.
You're welcome.
Who else has something to share?
I just wanted to share again that I love the idea of a 5 o'clock virtual happy hour, because as a chapter we're thinking about what are the best times to host anything, right? And it seems like a lot of sessions are around the 2 o'clock. I don't know why, but webinars choose 2 o'clock. So I'm wondering, Greg, it was great to hear from you around and Olga around that 5 o'clock. I'm wondering if anyone is taking advantage of the lunchtime hour, like the 11 o'clock, the 12 o'clock. I'm just curious about that timing.
I can share a little bit. I'm Tammy from the Greater New York chapter. One of the things that we've talked about is to avoid the lunchtime for burnout. I mean, people, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm like from 7:45 until 5 whatever at night. And that sometimes that lunch area could be sacred time. And we've been talking about what does our programming look like, and that's one area in which we're hoping to avoid, just to be able to give people that time to be able to get up, stretch, get something to eat. And now, depending on your schools, on those populations where if your kids are going to school in the mornings, there's that break until they come back in the afternoon, right? Or vice versa. So for us, that's something that we've been trying to avoid, is doing it during that time period.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for this lively discussion back and forth here, along with all the additional comments we have out there in chat rooms or in our chat discussion that you all can pull from. And thank you for sharing your chapter name so that it gives us some follow-up here as we leave this meeting today. All right, with that, Cassie, I'm going to turn things back over to you for our third topic.
Thanks so much, Christy. So for our third topic, and I think, Melissa, it was actually you who queued this up for us. We're going to really talk about sort of the construct of our boards, but also I want to spend some time talking about and recognizing the moment that we're in and how we're keeping our board members engaged, and maybe not feeling so much pressure or guilt, like maybe I'm only able to give so much in this time. So what are we doing there? So Melissa, you totally queued it up for me. If you want to facilitate the session, please, by all means, take it away. No, just kidding. So anyway, one of the first things that I really want to start talking about is representation on our boards. So if we could share as chapters and as boards, what steps have we taken to ensure that the board is representative of professionals in your area? So looking at things like institution type or size, different types of demographics, whether it's the positions that are represented on your board, race, ethnicity, gender, whatever it is. I know, just to give an example and start conversation, in our recent sort of election bid that we did, one of the things we really focused on was making sure we asked, what's your institution size? What position do you have? Because we were finding on our board that it tended to be the same types of institutions over and over again. And it was really who you knew, and then that would suddenly become a feeder for who was joining the board. But can anyone else talk about how you've diversified your board or made sure it's representative of the institutions in your area? Or if we want to, Beth, do we have a poll question actually for this?
Let me look. Let's see. No, we just had the virtual events and possibly one on other virtual connections.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't remember where we landed on that. So, all right, so let's take a step back then. How do you seat your board? I'm just curious about how you, as far as succession planning goes, because, that is one thing that I think in Southern New England, we have had difficulty with over the past few years. And certainly programs like Wildfire and Emerging Leader has lent itself to a nice natural pipeline for us to have interested new board members. But how is everybody else seating their board?
This is Kay in New Jersey. And I welcome some of my fellow New Jersey colleagues to jump in if they would like to. But something that we've done that has worked really well is just getting volunteers. So it may not be through Wildfire or the other avenues that you mentioned, but just volunteers who would like to learn more about our chapter, who would like to get more involved. And once we have you as a volunteer, a lot of our volunteers have naturally wanted to expand and increase and take on leadership opportunities. And so our recent positions that we just filled came from our volunteer pool or pipeline. And so I think that's a great way, just having people get more engaged with our chapter is a natural succession for them and for us. It's worked really well.
Okay, as a follow-up to that, how are you getting your volunteers? Are you sort of posting for interest in the CUPA communities? Is it after events? How does that work for you? And then in what capacity do they serve as a volunteer?
Sure. So just recently, right? So we hold 4 events a year, mini conferences. And so at our mini conferences, we always ask for volunteers. And get people that way. Also, through our surveys, But once someone is interested in volunteering, we ask them what is their area of interest. And so if they're interested in communications or interested in membership, then we link them with our current board member or with a board member to give them assignments, to, have them start to learn, or just in any type of volunteer capacity, whatever they're willing to do or help with. We give them that assignments, and that's how you learn. We get to know each other that way. We invite them to our board meetings so that they can listen in on what it takes to plan meetings. And so we really try to engage them in various ways, but I think starting with their interests, gets them going in terms of actually working with our chapter.
I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And as you were saying this, I was sort of reflecting on the spring conference that the Southern New England chapter did a few years ago. And it was our first time doing like a mini sort of day and a half conference. And we had our vendors set up with tables. And I wonder if maybe one good idea once we move forward into more normal times, whatever that looks like, is as chapters, maybe making sure that we set up a table among our vendors to really talk about the different opportunities with CUPA-HR and to get volunteers and all of that. So that could be another way that we go about sort of securing our pipeline in a way that's very familiar and easily accessible. So thank you for sharing that, Kay. Much appreciated.
Hi, this is Lauren, also from the New Jersey chapter. So I just want to piggyback off of something that Kay said. So in addition to asking for volunteers, through our chapter meetings, we also engage our wildfire participants and emerging leaders, anybody from our state, which is actually how I got involved. So, we've gotten a number of people involved that way as well.
Thank you, Lauren.
This is Tammy from the Greater New York chapter again. One of the things that I think that for what I see is that we have a missed opportunity in engaging students at our institutions who are involved in HR programs or are interested. And like I have 2 in our backyard and I engage with them in different ways, but not to the extent that I think we could in terms of developing a pipeline. It's things that we've talked about but haven't actually initiated or engaged with. So I'd be curious to hear if any of the other chapters have done that within their institutions and reached out to the students to not only participate in the board, but become part of the events or any other sort of nature that you find.
Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. I know working at an institution of art and design, we don't have that opportunity. But when I was at a more liberal arts college previously, there was a great pipeline of student employees in our office that were sort of willing to share their ideas and energy. Has any other chapter had success in using student talent, either on the boards or as volunteers?
Well, if anybody's interested in partnering to figure out, like, I think about it, right? Like I'm at Cornell and ILR is right there. And I think a college that has a business program with a very active student HR chapter who, even though they don't have an HR program, but it's something, and I see Amy from our board is on there too. So I think that's something, if anybody wants to partner, reach out to me. I'd love, and the board, love to explore like what opportunities we might be able to do to share.
It looks like Mike has just shared something. Mike serves as a faculty member at his institution as well, and does share more information about CUPA with students. And the Florida chapter has utilized students to help at events. Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm sorry, you put yourself out there. Can you share just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so if this was already said, I apologize. My mother-in-law called, and when she calls, I answer. So I stepped away. So as a faculty member at one of the other institutions in our state, I have shared CUPA and told folks to join. It's not just SHRM, but we do have some students that are interested in higher ed HR. So I tell them to join CUPA as well. I did talk to somebody at the Florida chapter, and I can't remember her name right now, but we were talking about this probably about a year ago, and she had suggested, as they do, they utilize students to help with events. So it gets them there, one. They don't have to pay for the great content at the meetings when we could actually have meetings face-to-face, but they would also help with things like basically like ticketing, like have people sign in, do setup stuff like that, and kind of their payment is to hear the various speakers. So something that I was going to bring up at the Maryland chapter soon, but of course, COVID happened. So I think we can still utilize them by just trying to get them to join our online meetings as well. But it would have been cool to be able to physically have them there and have them network, which was kind of what Florida does.
Thank you so much, Mike. Anybody else want to share about their leadership pipeline before we move on to the next subtopic? Are there any chapters that currently have any sort of vacated positions, and what are you doing to try to seat those positions at this time?
Well, Cassie, as you know, the Southern New England is without a president-elect, and I am trying everything I can do as the current president not to do what is the historical norm, which is to bend someone's arm at your current institution, right? I think that that's, you know, a pattern that we have traditionally fallen into. It's when you can't find somebody, you just go to someone who you literally work with every day and say, here, I need you to kind of come and step up. What that kind of encourages, though, is that there's only a few institutions that are really represented in kind of the leadership discussions. So trying not to do that. But I think it's been, particularly in this environment, challenging to figure out, outside of, you know, just continuing to remind people that there is the opportunity to get involved. A lot of the people on our board have been on the board for many, many years. They've all worn different hats, and they're all like, yeah, I'm not doing that rodeo again. So we just need to, you know, think about how to bring in that new blood. And I think in the absence right now in this space of doing some of the live events, it's more challenging to kind of really kind of get people interested.
Yeah, I think especially because they can't sort of see and feel the excitement of what it means to actually be a leader and to really see the work that goes into planning an event. And I think also to be on the receiving end of the feedback after an event, it's so rewarding, because I would say 9 times out of 10, there's a lot of gratitude that comes from the participants of our events. I think especially because we're so conscious about cost, making sure that the topics are relevant and timely. And so just to see the different rewards, I know that's one thing that we tried to do over the past few years, is really to talk about the benefits of being a volunteer leader. So one, recognizing that, yeah, maybe you will be using a lunch break or doing some work on off hours, but here are all the great opportunities that come with being a volunteer leader. And this is why I continue to do what I do and to remain involved. And I know that is one thing that we had planned for our Eastern Southern Conference this past spring, was a sort of a pre-boarding session to talk about, this is why I'm involved in CUPA-HR. So I think the more that we can share why we do what we do and spend the time doing what we're doing, I do think that that's a helpful way to get people involved and get them excited. Hopefully we'll get to do that session sometime soon in person, but thanks,
You know,
Bill.
Bill, just another idea, and I hate to use the word coercion, but sometimes that's what it is. The Rocky Mountain CUPA chapter recently has a new president of the chapter who came from corporate and had never been in higher ed before. And the appropriate people on their board invited her to understand how great the CUPA organization was and indoctrinated her a little bit relative to the networking capabilities and the, you know, feel free to reach out to people, know higher ed, HR. And, you know, subtly then they said, hey, and by the way, we would like you to be on the board. And so maybe think about those of your colleagues that have come from outside of higher ed who might be in HR leadership roles on other campuses.
That's a great idea, Kelly. Yeah, coercion is a strong word.
Yes.
We like to think of incentivize. How do we incentivize people? The other thing we've been thinking about too is, because as we've diversified our programming and as we've rolled out a day-and-a-half conference, we're very financially sound as a chapter. So the other thing we've been thinking of is, you know, maybe one of the ways to get people into the pipeline and encourage people is to kind of help them with some of the costs that are associated with, for example, going to national or going to a regional conference, because that's something that, you know, for a smaller institution, they may not have the funds to do that. And if we could kind of help with some of those costs, because we do have a very kind of sound budget, and we've been very careful about that over the years. That's another thing that might encourage people to kind of come up through the ranks and do their time, because they're also getting, they're being allowed to go to maybe event they otherwise their institution couldn't afford.
Yeah, that has certainly worked well for us, was really exploring that conversation a couple years ago and incentivizing, hey, you know, go to the national conference, go to a local regional conference, attend these events, represent our chapter, network with others, but then, you know, continue to focus on the development of someone else. I also think that that always makes a very appealing opportunity for someone who might be in a more entry-level position. I know for me, when I first started with the Southern New England chapter, I was in a very entry-level position, and just having sort of the exposure to and opportunity to network with individuals who maybe held higher level positions was absolutely instrumental in the development of my career, just by doing something really fun. And so, you know, for me, that's been enormously helpful. So there are certain benefits that I think we don't always, you know, think about just by having that opportunity to network or work alongside others from the area. That in itself is a development opportunity. And for somebody who's very career focused and career minded and excited, it's an opportunity that, you know, most people wouldn't pass up. Especially because you get to have fun while you're doing it. A lot of high fives and hugs. All right, so, and no hugging now, by the way. So I guess the next thing that I would like for us to sort of transition to is this conversation of how are we keeping our boards engaged right now? And Melissa, I am going to call on you again if you're comfortable, just because you sort of queued up the conversation. But what is your board doing to keep people engaged? I know one of the things I heard you say is recognizing sort of the division of work, and recognizing that if there are more hands in the pot, it makes for lighter work. So could you talk to us a little bit more about what Northern New England is doing right now?
Sure, and I'm really, I appreciate this conversation because we do have some folks from Northern New England on, so shout out to Ellen, Jeannie, and Heidi as well, and please keep me honest. So a couple things we've been talking about is just the sheer amount of work that everyone's facing in their own jobs, and just trying to figure out how do we make sure that people don't feel like they need to, for example, just kind of like, I can't do this, and work through that together. So one, you've already mentioned, Cassie, is thinking about communication as being a shared piece for all of us. And the other thing we've been talking about is just thinking, instead of fall, we decided to think of a winter event. And part of that was because of the bandwidth of just our board to be able to kind of support a fall event right now, but also kind of knowing that our peers and colleagues are probably facing similar things and trying to navigate what the effects are as a result of COVID. So we've been thinking sort of more for winter. The other thing that I've talked about with the board is just talking about the agility to say that if someone can't do something, how can we all take a piece of that? So I hope I'm speaking in truth here, Ellen, Heidi, and Jeannie, but I've just kind of put out there to say, I think we're all kind of feeling a little in a place like, can we do this? And I know we can as a team. I shared a metaphor that this might be really hokey, but there is a metaphor out there, and it's more of a symbolism than it is a metaphor that, and tell me if this is really hokey, Cassie, but when birds are flying in formation, the person who is at the head, the bird that is at the head is often taking a lot of headwind. And there's been studies shown that each team member actually shares a responsibility in taking the lead of that formation, not just to give a sense of leadership that everyone has a role in it, but also to give a rest to the bird that is leading the way. So there's that real team in that V. And some other things that are known is that annoying honking is actually actually a way to cheerlead each other to say, you got this, keep going. So as much as we hear Canadian geese honking all the time, they're actually championing each other to fly. And if one has to break away from the team, then another leaves that formation, stays with that bird until that bird can catch up. So I've been thinking about that as it relates to our board and how we can all kind of take a piece. I think the other thing that we've talked about too is how do we create some incentive for our own board. So our president-elect, who is amazing, I don't know if she's on here, Anne Dubois, she's looking to bring in a presenter on how we can actually create bios for ourselves, as in like just kind of, gee, we're in a board and we do bios all the time, but we think about that as our career. We don't think about how do we represent the work we do in the board in a bio. So we're going to do a workshop for ourselves, and that's kind of a way to kind of start to think about how we take care of each other as well.
I love that idea, actually making sure you continue to develop as a board too. I think I think we're so focused on service to others, which that is our sort of primary charge, but making sure that we take the time for ourselves as well and to continue to develop. And we're only as strong as our leadership. So I think that's great. Thank you. And I loved your metaphor. Like, I'm the queen of cheese and a good joke. And so I actually took a lot from that, and I didn't think it was hokey at all. And I bet everybody else on this call agrees as well. So
great.
You're getting thumbs up, Melissa, if you can't see it. So anybody else, how are you keeping your boards engaged right now? Have you given permission to your board to say, hey, you know what, we're doing the best we can. We recognize that, you know, this might be a year where we have to step back. I think sometimes hearing that, you know, one of the things I find about my involvement in CUPA is just how driven everyone is, how committed everyone is. And even for myself, I know sometimes hearing like, hey, it's okay to take a beat. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. It's totally okay to take a beat. It's okay for your expectations to vary and change and ebb and flow, and to sort of take the pressure off ourselves. Is anybody else experiencing that? And what does that look like for your board?
I'm happy to share a couple things about taking the load off. I put a little bit into the chat. We have expanded at-large members in the Maryland chapter. We have fully functioning committees, multiple committees. And so that's a way to build a talent pipeline, but also share the love and the work. And it already is reducing the stress in the board members that have those fancy titles. Just making sure that we do a lot, because there's a lot more to do now in this COVID-19 event planning, you know, because we're doing a lot of stuff online, but we're also doing 2 events a month as opposed to just our quarterly meetings. So we're sharing the love and sharing the work. And I also do some hokey things by sending out, I got everyone's cell phone numbers, and I just send out kind of hokey messages every once in a while, and, you know, just see who, you know, kind of responds back. But just to kind of make it fun and keep the level of stress down.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mike. I think you are the equivalent of the bird cheerleader there. So that's really great.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me at all. Cassie, I appreciated so much that, you know, you just talked about how we need to be real with ourselves. And, you know, we're an ambitious group of overachievers just based on our commitment to CUPA-HR and being on this call today, knowing what we all have going on, you know, the day after a holiday, and for many of us, the holiday we got to work. You know, but I think that's so true. And while I don't represent a chapter anymore, I can say, you know, I've had some of those similar conversations in my office with HR professionals there with, you know, let's take a moment to be thankful we're not brain surgeons. If a deadline gets missed, if we screw something up, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? We get a fine that we have to pay, or your insurance drops and we reinstate it. It's fixable. It might result in more paperwork, but it's fixable. You know, so I think we just really need to be real about what are our self-imposed deadlines and where can we take a breath and skip it or push it back, or where is it really a critical deadline because it's going to impact many others? You know, and it's not a typical A+ student kind of year, because if you're striving for A+ in this environment, it means you're not sleeping anymore. You know, I think it's a strange reality of where we are. So I appreciate it when I hear leadership, and I think for all of us, when we do it for our boards or our employees, when we call it out and model those behaviors too, it normalizes something that seems very unnormal.
I really, Christy, you sort of took the words out of my mouth. As HR professionals, we lead by example all the time. So we are making sure we abide by the policies, the procedures, the best practices, and making sure that we are representative of sort of the values of our institution. But that applies to everything. So we can't be telling managers, you need to be flexible with your employees. You need to sort of give everybody a little bit of leeway at this time and recognizing it's strange times, and not give that gift to ourselves, because like you said, we're going to burn out very quickly. And if we haven't already, and I think if we don't take those times, then we can't continue to provide the top quality service that our institutions have come to expect from our departments. And it always is so reaffirming just how nice the higher ed community is, because, you know, anytime we do a presentation or, you know, you help somebody with something, I know for us, we're hearing, I'm so glad I know how busy you are. I think now more than ever, the staff and faculty at our institutions are actually recognizing how much we have on our shoulders. And to feel that gratitude and appreciation, sometimes it just wants to sort of force you to keep moving forward at a pace that might not be sustainable. So when getting that recognition as well, I think to say, okay, people do see how much is going on. It is okay to sort of take a deep breath. For the most part, people are really sort of seeing us and hearing us maybe for the first time. And so why not take a moment to revel in that and have people see us in HR as humans too. So I think, you know, I don't want to stifle any conversation, but I do believe I've sort of hit the end of this, and I don't want to do any sort of spoiler alerts before I pass it over to Beth and Julie. There are many things that we talked about in our prep and planning call that CUPA-HR has in the works, whether it's resources or things planned to help us sort of take a beat. And so with that said, Beth and Julie, if you want to take it from here.
Thank you, Cassie. And again, I want to thank everyone for your participation today. I think this has been great. Lots of great ideas and discussions taking place. And don't forget, just like at the ALP, it doesn't end here. We do have the chapter management community in CUPA-HR Connect. So feel free to continue these conversations there, especially if you have questions that you want to ask of someone who maybe shared an idea or a success story. Certainly visit the chapter community and connect and ask those questions. And with that, I want to show you some of the resources that the CUPA-HR National Office does have available. And let me see if I can get my screen to share here. So I want to show everyone the toolkit. And are you seeing that on your screen yet? Okay. Zoom's being a little finicky and it's not showing me that it's lit up right now. So on the CUPA-HR website, you'll see the For Volunteers section. If you'll click on that and then scroll down to the Region and Chapter Leaders Toolkit, here we have resources to help your chapter board as you plan your events, really anything that you're working on for your chapter. We have resources here to help. And again, I think as Julie or someone has mentioned earlier, if there's something that you're looking for and you don't see it, please let us know. We certainly want to make this the best tool possible for you. So we're always open to suggestions and happy to help you navigate any questions that you may have about the toolkit. We have changed it up a little bit. So if you haven't been out here in a while, it may look just a little bit different, but it's still pretty much laid out in a similar manner. We do have an area now for important dates and deadlines and new items this year. And then our tabs here below that kind of dive a little deeper into all of the subjects. So one thing I want to start off with is we all discussed the virtual platform options. The National Office does have the availability to host your virtual platforms for you through Zoom. We're happy to do that. If you've not seen information about that, please check it out here in the toolkit. You'll see this first option here, the virtual event support. And I won't go into too many details, but just to quickly point out, we do have 2 options for you. We have a full support, and then we have a platform only support. The full support is where the national office is going to have more of a working relationship with your chapter on this presentation, where the platform only is pretty much what it sounds like. We'll host it for you through Zoom, but the majority of the work is going to fall on your chapter board. So I encourage you to take a moment and look at these options, especially if your chapter's considering hosting a virtual event, but you haven't yet. We're more than happy to partner with you on that and help you do that and be a success at that. A couple of things to think about as you're looking at your events. I would encourage you to look at the CUPA-HR calendar of events so that you know your event is not happening at the same time as another event, knowing that the national office staff, we are small in number, so sometimes we might be assisting another chapter and we would not be available to host your event maybe at the date or time that you've selected. So we do ask for alternate dates. So as you are meeting with your board and looking at options for a virtual event, please take that into consideration. Something else to think about, I know several of you have touched on other ways to connect virtually. We do have the chapter communities, the online communities for our chapters. I know several of the chapters on the call today are taking advantage of that and using that. That's great. I have been looking at the communities that we have out there, and especially since we've been dealing with the pandemic and we all are working online, I know there's been an increase in activity out there. Maybe if your community's not had an increase and you want to make it more active, I have some great news for you. I've been reviewing the different communities and I've created some health metrics. And I think that that will be a great way to help your chapter look at what you are currently doing online and highlight some of the ways that you're doing a great job, and then look at some opportunities where you can improve or think about ways to make the community grow. So I'm going to be reaching out next month with some of those metrics for the communities that are out there. Discuss that with your board. And my hope is moving forward, this is something that I can present to you every year at the ALP. And you can use it as part of your action plan for the year as you're thinking about ways that your board you're setting your goals, your action items, your plans for engagement, then this would naturally fall into place for that. So more to come from me on that. If you are thinking about having an online community, we have information in the toolkit in the area. That's chapter website, email, and online community. We have information about the community itself, what that would look like, and then the request chapter community button out here. So if you have questions, if you think you might want to do an online community, I'm happy to answer those questions for you. Or I can connect you with someone who currently has one so that you could ask them questions and get a feel from it from them. And the last thing that I want to talk about, and you guys did a great job of touching on your leadership pipeline. You had some wonderful ideas, and actually a lot of the things that I was going to discuss, you guys have already touched on, so that's great. But one thing I want to remind everyone with your leadership pipeline, think of it as it's not the same as engagement. The engagement is what's going to grow your leadership pipeline. So every quarter I share a list of our CUPA-HR member and non-members through the chapter community. And so that's a way that I hope that you can use that list to engage folks in your chapter area and get them involved. Not so much that you reach out to these people and say, hey, we need a secretary. Can you help fill that role? This is to help get people engaged in your chapter, to let them know, hey, we have this event coming up. We've noticed no one from your institution has been able to join us. We would love to have someone join this next event, especially if they're free and they're virtual. That is opening up more opportunities for people to come see what your chapter is about. So using those lists to do that personal outreach will hopefully increase the number of people who are participating and engaging with your chapter. And then from those people, you can start tapping them for, have you ever thought about serving on the chapter board? I know I heard some people mention about using wildfire and emerging CUPA-HR leaders. Either the applicants, Julie always shares that with us in the spring, the folks who were not selected to serve, they really want to be a part of the CUPA-HR community. So those are great people to tap into to get them involved with your chapter. And also think about creating those committees where people can kind of dip their toe in the water and see what it's about without making the full commitment of serving on the board. And lastly, making sure that you have information on your website. Share what those position descriptions look like so people can see what they'll be doing in that role. Think about listing the amount of time that's typically served in those roles, so people know that it can be a balance, but that as a board you all are in there together as well. Especially when it comes time for your board elections, make sure that you have your website updated, you have information, a timeline in a sense for when you're going to accept nominations to be on your chapter board, when you're going to close that, when will the applicants expect to hear from you? Are you contacting them to interview them? As much information as you can share, that will encourage people to submit their nominations. And then also an onboarding process. And I highly recommend that you use the toolkit as part of your onboarding process. We have a great toolkit overview, a quick video that highlights everything in the toolkit. And then some of our sections also have more detailed videos. You'll see we have a section on chapter financials and chapter bylaws. We also have information out here to explain the difference between chapter emails and a chapter community and communicating to your participants that way. So again, if there's something out here that you think we're missing, please let me know. I certainly want to get it out there for you. If there's something out here that doesn't quite make sense, let me know that as well too. I'm happy to speak with you on that and maybe clarify. And the last thing that I want to share with you is we have added the chapter assessment and action plan checklist. And so for those of you who have attended the ALP previously, this is something that we did hand out during this region and chapter board session. So now we have it in the toolkit. And I would encourage your chapter board to print this out, use it to guide your plans for the year, and then also use it when you meet with your region board representative so that they can work with you to help accomplish these goals. And also throughout the year, it's an easy way to kind of follow up and see where you are and celebrate what you've done and see what plans you have left to do. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn things over to Eric. Again, Eric is your region board chair and he's going to wrap things up for us. Eric?
Well, thank you very much. I got at least 3 pages of notes and I'll go through those in the next 90 seconds. What we kind of took a look at here, I think if you think back on the discussions today, we talked a lot about virtual meetings. I think they're here to stay. I don't think they're ever going to go away. Some of the points that I liked was Siegel and Kelly Jones are offering a half-day chapter or joint chapter webinars on a variety of subjects through their platform of hopin.to. And I'm sure if you contacted Siegel, they'd be happy to help you set up some things like that. Gauging chapters verbally or virtually is tough. You have events planned, try to get more engagement. I still love the wine and wine sessions because you got no one to complain to at work. It's just the way it is. Most HR people, one of the best things for engagement, if you look at the research, it says you have a best friend at work. If you're in HR, chances are extraordinarily good that is not true. I tried it a few times, and in 2 out of the 3 cases, I actually ended up firing my friends. So you gotta, there's a lot of things you gotta be careful about with that. But you've got a giant family with CUPA-HR, and I think it's important to engage with everybody, both formally through chapter events and meetings, but also informally as much as you can. Starting to involve the students more in your institution in this planning, helping plan for meetings, having them do the technology. I think that's extraordinarily good. I usually have my 10-year-old granddaughter take care of some things for me if I need it. What kind of platforms you use, whether you use a website or different kinds of social media or LinkedIn or through sponsors like Siegel. There really is no one way to communicate. You have to communicate in a multiple variety of ways, including at sometimes actually mailing letters through the United States Postal Service to send to people, because some people, that's the only way they communicate. So pay attention to your audience. You want to improve the demographics. There's a lot of things you can do to improve the demographics of your audience. But you need to have a communication strategy to do that. All right, it's really important to decide how you're going to communicate, before events, after events. CUPA's got their community platform that you can set up for things like that. There's a lot of other ways that you can do it. What other fun things I got in here? You got to decide what works best for people in terms of communication. And I got to tell you, I'll just give you one brief example. I have no idea where hashtags go. I've used them. I've put them in my, hashtag CUPA-HR, yay, and all that stuff. Where they go or how you access them, I have absolutely no clue in the world. So for me, that's just an exercise in futility, but I pass it along because I figure some people know how to do it. So start thinking about some of us older people who used to use dial phones, and start thinking about how you're going to engage people like that as well. And in smaller college communities when, they may not have the technology that you have available to you. So that's really important. Getting more volunteers, wildfire emerging leaders, students. We have a very strange model for hiring security at St. Bonaventure. We have 33 part-time security people, and most of them work maybe 2 hours a month, which is, totally strange. But that got me thinking in terms of, you only have a certain amount of board members you're allowed to have as board members, but you are allowed to create all kinds of committees, okay? And those committees can be chaired and housed and run by a lot of other people other than the board members. So start thinking about that. If you want to go out into social media and maybe nobody of the board members has it, well, then go find somebody. Maybe some of the HR students at your university. CUPA offers a free membership to anyone who's studying HR in a college who wants to engage in some of that. Grab some of those people, entice them with that membership and all the resources that you've just seen even briefly here. But I think what's really important is to start. Pop up my secret question. Why don't you schedule a meeting soon to discuss all the stuff we've talked here today? Have a chapter board meeting to discuss what you've learned, how you're going to regroup to try to implement some of these things and create goals designed to engage and communicate better with your target audiences. Share those goals with people and get their input on things. You don't have to be insular as a board. You really can expand the advice you get outside the virtual chapter board meeting that you have, if you have those. Reinforce, I can't emphasize enough those casual connections. Just calling up somebody to ask how they're doing or how they do something is incredibly important. CUPA's been sponsoring those informal stop, swap, and roll sessions. That's exactly what those things are. You got a burning question, you got a burning issue, you just want to vent. You've got a whole slew of people in CUPA-HR willing to listen to for any and all of those reasons. So 6 minutes, 26 seconds of talking on my part. So am I even still here?
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. We're so glad to have you and the rest of the board, and thanks to all of our chapters for joining us today. Hit us up in the chapter management group and CUPA-HR Connect if you have more questions, and have a great week. I hope you all got something from today, and just let us know if there's anything else we can do to help.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all for being here.
Care.